So thanks for coming again. We've got Ben around here today, a UXer with a keen interest in delivery methodology, should I say. He worked at Elaborate for some time, who are leaders in Agile. And so he's got some things to say about how the two go together. He's got his own company now, Speak and Flip.
That's right.
Yeah. And handing over.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's really nice to see so many people and so many people who I haven't seen in quite a while, so that's very nice. Tonight I guess we're going to be talking about Agile and UX research, and I guess I didn't realize it was so interesting to so many people until I started talking to UX designers and talking to developers and finding that there was kind of some tension there and it wasn't really sure how everyone was supposed to be working together. I wrote a blog post about it late last year and got some really interesting feedback from people, and I guess this is kind of building on what I learned from that experience and in my experience at Elaborate and a few other places on trying to merge these two things together. I kind of wanted to start by saying that this talk has these two assumptions built into it. And the first one is that UX research is very valuable and should be done if you're designing anything, especially if you're designing these products. I'm not saying anything super controversial in this room, but you go and do this same talk for people who work in development and then look at the first one kind of a bit cross-eyed at you and then love the second one. So it kind of plays out a bit differently where you go. But the second one is that Agile is proven to be the most effective way of developing good software. There's a lot of people not doing Agile and making rubbish out of it, but if you look at sort of high-performing teams making good stuff, they're generally working in an Agile way. And we kind of have these two things that I think are very much proven to be the most effective way to make software, and it's really surprising that we haven't got a really cohesive way of joining them together. It should be obvious, we should have kind of figured this out, but there's definitely this tension between this moving fast and breaking things and trying to spend time understanding the users. So these two assumptions are in here. If you want to kind of debate me on either of them not being super relevant or important, I'm happy to do that, but I'm not going to do that in these slides. And I think if I was to sort of summarize this down, I just think we should work iteratively and listen to users. And especially on that users part, it kind of just seems like etiquette. It seems nice. If you're going to build stuff for people to use, ask them if they like it and watch them use it, and then take those learnings in and make the product better in kind of increments so they kind of get to experience that. But again, nothing I think super controversial. A little bit, I guess, about me, not too much, but just to kind of some context about why I'm speaking about this and I guess where my biases kind of come from. And I wanted to do it sort of this thing that I'm sure a lot of you have seen. And the idea is that good software gets made when it's feasible, right? A developer can make it, it's easy to make, it's desirable, people want to use it. And it's viable, right? Businesses can afford to keep it running and they can afford to keep it going and invest in time in making it better. So I guess my background is I really, this dark circle here means that I do a lot more of this. I'm an experienced designer. The dark denotes that in this graphic. But I started off my journey as a developer at the ANZ, working on this really awful system that wasn't that great. But the good thing for me is that the people who were using it didn't sit that far away from me. It was an internal tool, and the people who were using it were kind of there. And so when they didn't like using it, they'd let you know, you can and people would get a few drinks in and they're I hate that thing, it's awful. And you're oh, I know, and that's where the light bulb moment kind of happened. But if you build things for people, you can make it better by listening to their experience. And so, as that I was not a very good developer, I moved into the field of design. But I still kind of try and keep that immense respect for developers because making things is very hard. And so, I guess most of my career is kind of been working in Agile environments and Agile being they call themselves that, but they've definitely been in different places and done it different ways and I guess value different things. But very recently I've been lucky enough to have a product management role where I kind of put my money where my mouth was, you know, like you're suddenly kind of in charge of prioritizing the work and deciding what kind of UX research you had time for, and you sort of felt that tension within yourself of wanting to get things done, but knowing the proper process should be learning more. And I don't know how successful I was sort of through that, but you kind of brought it home for me. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me and kind of where I've come from and why I'm talking about this. And to kind of get into it, I really believe this to be true, which is that UX research goes stale over time. And when I say the research, I mean like the artifacts we create, so like the personas and the journey maps and the site maps and all of these things that we create. Over time, they just kind of lose relevance. You can't do these things and set and forget them. And I like this idea of like putting the best before at the bottom, so you know when this thing was made and you know when it's kind of set to expire, and just push people into making them do these things kind of more iteratively. And when I say it goes stale, like it goes stale for a lot of reasons. And the first one is that everything changes all the time. Like the pace of software changes, the way we're solving problems for people, like people get new solutions, and then technology kind of creates new problems for people, and then we have to try and solve those problems. People's jobs to be done change. But also, I guess our product hopefully changes over time, and we might like need to pivot or find new people. And especially the team changes, right? The people who are working on this platform change. Like some people leave and they go on to new things, or you might be an agency and you're handing over internally. And I guess moving on to this second point really relates to this, is that the artifact only kind of captures 10% of all the interesting stuff that happens when you do research. So you kind of go out into the field and you meet all these people and you kind of learn not their mannerisms, but like the things that they care about and their passion and all these little bits and pieces. And then you try and distill that down into a persona. And all that persona really does is like, it's kind of the thing you look at that brings all of that information back. You know, it's the thing that you look at that kind of remembers that experience when you're designing things. And that memory of those users goes down over time, where the persona that you got up on the wall just kind of looks the same. And so as members of the team change, they don't have all that past experience. They don't have all that context, and they're just kind of reading this persona and going, yeah, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. I guess that's kind of what I expected. Don't have any of the value. And that the act of researching is more valuable than the research itself. So like, being in a phase where you're researching things makes you make choices, like who are our users? Because we're going to have to get some into the building, or we're going to have to go and find them, right? Like, where would I find them? How would I incentivize them to come in? What prototype, what features am I going to show them? How will they, I guess, like those things? What questions would we have to ask? All of those, just even without the talking to the users bit, all of those actions, all of those processes make our work better. And if you kind of just finish all of the research and then 6 months go by, you can't think about those stuff anymore. And so research goes stale. And I guess to try and think about it like this, like the goal isn't like to make the research so good that it lasts longer, right? Because if we think of other things that last a long time, like canned food like lasts forever, right? Like research that you kind of did that doesn't have anything interesting in it will stay just as relevant as it was when you made it. But like it's not nourishing, it's not nice, nobody wants it, but like it's cheap and it's super quick. And like, I guess all the way on this side of the scale, like the fruit, the veggies, the meat, like that's the interesting research that I think that we like to do. And if you're going to be like do anything more than baseline, if you want to be innovative, that's the kind of stuff that's going to sustain your team or your company. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you want. And I do think that there is this kind of nice middle ground between the two. Like, this is definitely not always possible. Like, sometimes we're under budget, or we're over budget, or we've got short time frames, and there's this cake mix idea, right? Where there's some dry ingredients that like kind of, I don't know if I'm overreaching this analogy, but there's some dry ingredients that kind of like last forever. But then we want to throw in some eggs and some milk and some berries and some chocolate, and we can kind of mix those things together, have a bit of a middle ground. And it's also good if there's not dedicated UX on the project, right? Like other people can do those things. Like I can't bake, but I can maybe make a packet mix. Maybe that's too much of a claim, but this is what, I just pulled this off the internet, so if anyone made this, I apologize, but probably not. But this is what like spam UX research looks like. Like this would last the heat death of the universe. Like it says literally nothing. Like IT and internet is more, like this much more than software. Mobile apps, not so good. Frustrations, doesn't like data crashes. true. I really don't like that. So like, no data crashes in my application, right? So there's nothing valuable here. This is spam. This is like little bits of tin corn that we just move with you from house to house because we don't really know how to use it. So I had the top quote in this presentation, and then I gave it to my girlfriend to, she spells it, she spell checks it and reads it, and she put my name at the end of it, so then I put her name at the end. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. But like, I like do this probably more often, right? Like, if UX research is kind of like eating real vegetables, like sometimes it's fun to just have ideas and muck around and make prototypes and eat KFC. Like, that's fun, that's great. Don't do it all the time. And don't fall into this trap of like, I'll start tomorrow. So the amount of projects I've been on with are like, UX research, definitely. We're definitely going to do that. That is like the best idea. I mean, not now, because we don't have any time, but like the next project, definitely going to do it. It's really important. Just sit down there. Okay. Good analogy is almost over. So, what does a balanced UX research diet look like? So how do we decide if we're getting the right mix of UX research? And this is the kind of slide where I want to, I guess, start pulling together Agile, right, and where that might fit here. And so what we want to do is make sure that what we're doing diverges and converges, right? We want to make sure that we're doing just as much research that kind of goes broad and finds things out about people, as well as converges, right? Coming back in, making choices, doing usability testing, making the right thing. Yeah, so we want to make sure that we go large and we go small. And then the word iterative, right? We want to make sure that it's iterative and ongoing. Like, you can't make a good experience if you only ever have one crack at it. Because if you only have one crack at it, you've got to make all of these kind of assumptions, and you only do so much research, you only build so many things, you can't learn from your experience, and the thing kind of dies over time. So like, iterative needs to be baked in. And it needs to include all members of the team. It can't just be you're the owner of the UX, you're the only person who gets to speak to the users. Like, one that's like super tiring, like unless you can kind of share that out amongst the team, it's definitely not going to scale. And then we also want to make sure that like it's a diverse set of users. We're not just talking to like one small set of people. And if you only do UX research once, that's what happens. You can only talk to the people you found that time. You can't change or pivot or move on. And you've got to use a broad range of methods. And so if you only do UX research at the front, at the start of the project, again, you can only do what fits in what made sense right then. You can't change and do different things at different times when you're validating different ideas or different assumptions. Slip fade. So these top ones that are in bold, suspiciously in bold, is kind of really where Agile and this fit together. Like, Agile principles about diverging and converging and working as a team, having cross-functional skills and working iteratively. Like, these two things should really marry together really well. Like, it should work in sync with each other. This stuff really is not too different. So it kind of gets us to this. This is kind of where the rubber hits the road in terms of questions for me. So if you're thinking about like, where do we put the UXer? So we've got Agile teams, we've got 3 on the left, and we've got 3 UXers, right? It's the easiest way to do them up. Should we put them in the teams, right? Working in a proper Agile world, cross-functional, or do we put them over here onto the right-hand side in their own little team, feeding all of those other teams, right? The next slide doesn't say it's left or right, there's no. Although that would be a super quick talk. Can I get a sort of a sense in the room who feels like they're working in Agile environments at the moment? Cool. That kind of makes sense. It's an Agile UX research talk. And so, how many people feel like they're working sort of closer to this model? Okay, that's good. It kind of feels like everyone, but and this side over here. Okay, yeah, still a few people. This is very much kind of like an agency model. Like, if you've got like a UX research agency, they're kind of somewhat excluded from the teams, and like you're trying to include that as much as possible. There's definitely problems which we're going to get into with both methods, and what we need to do is try to find like a nice mix. So to figure out where we should put them, I'm going to try and very simply talk about like an Agile team. And there's a lot more complexity to this, which I'm sure you'll be able to point out. But I guess generally speaking, if we've got an Agile team and they don't have any UXs in them, there's developers, testers, there's PMs and POs and business analysts. What they're trying to do is, I guess, all work together towards a common goal, right? Like, so someone has an idea on the left, and then they kind of all work through together in one kind of single stream to make something great on the right-hand side. Right? They're all working on like the same code and they're testing the things that the developers are making, and this is definitely not kind of as easy as maybe this makes it look. Like there's plenty of people making plenty of talks about getting the Agile experience to work well for just those kind of related disciplines. But there's many times where then you kind of just throw the UX into the mix. They're just like, it's cross-functional, everyone should get along. And you kind of have this kind of really disruptive element kind of coming in, and the UX is trying to do their best, and the developers and testers, they're trying to do their best. And you're kind of in this middle of like trying to figure out what the thing is while you're trying to figure out how to build the thing, and everyone's kind of getting in everybody's way, right? So it's just kind of like this stop, stop, stop. The UXer keeps blocking progress, right? So we haven't done the 6 weeks worth of research that we needed to figure out if we're solving the right problem, right? Or we need to build every feature before we launch. It needs to be perfect. It needs to be big batch. And you kind of, this doesn't work. This just puts people at kind of odds with each other. It kind of is rare. Everyone feels kind of bad about themselves because no one feels like they're being successful. UX research feels rushed. They don't feel like they can do a very good job in this environment. Like, it's not even like if the UXer could just like play well with others, it would be okay. Like, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen in the UX process that is very difficult to get. And then if we flip to like the other side of that, right? So we take the UXers out of the mix, they're going to do their own little UXy thing on the side. Like this happens, right? It's that stale user research where like, who knows what's getting going? And like, the way I think about this is like the UXers, they just lose their influence the minute they get that far away from delivery. And one of the reasons is, and like, it's an awful truth for a UXer, right? But like, there's nothing inherently kind of valuable in just the research UX stuff, right? Like if you had a company that just was UX researchers and no developers and you're making software, the user wouldn't use anything, right? Like you'd have the best design or the best wireframe and the best like things, but users wouldn't have a better experience. Which on the flip side, if you have a bunch of developers, like what they make might not be very good, but like the users will use it and it might work, it might not. They have a lot of power to get things out there, right? They're kind of like that last word of things. And so UXers need to figure out like how to get into that world, right? They need to find out how to have influence so they can bring the user who likes boysenberry ice cream as close to the developer as possible. Who if like, you can kind of get past these two levels, like the developer will just come up with a different solution that would make boysenberry work. You know, they want to make like good experiences as well. Yeah, this is where we get like to the controversial kind of UX designery stuff. But like, I kind of know, like as a designer, like I'm very optimistic, and a lot of the designers I meet are also very optimistic. And our kind of role is that we're trying to make the best possible experience. And so I'm kind of separated from the world of the pragmatic dev for too long. We design these really gold-plated experiences that would, if implemented, be amazing. But they don't get implemented, and they're not amazing. And developers don't like it because they don't like saying no all the time. Like, they would like to do that too, but they're the ones who have to sit there and kind of type away at the code and get this thing out. And so maybe they didn't need this Unicom thing that's impossible to build, and maybe kind of what they just needed is, I don't know why, but such an angry looking horse. Sometimes when you're a noun project and you're just looking for images, there's too much choice. Actually, originally it pointed the other way, so it was more sad. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's detail you didn't need. So what are we solving for, right? So we've got to understand the problem. It's hard to kind of mix these two things together. And what we're trying to do is come up with a process that works for everybody and makes really good software. So what are the pain points that we're kind of feeling? What are the objections that we get? So we get that we don't have any time to do UX research. Right? So the solution we have, the solution we need needs to be quick. And it can't be too expensive. We don't have budget for UX, so it needs to be cheap. We're kind of missing the expertise, like people in the company don't have the experience and we don't have time to train them up, so whatever we come up with needs to be easy or easy to learn. And the last one here is kind of, I guess, everything else is a symptom of that, which is that people don't see the value in doing it, right? Like people will spend money on things that they value. They will spend time if they think it's finding value. And so what we need to do is not necessarily spruik the value that UX has, but like find ways to bring that value early. Like how do we get through something small that makes the start of the project easier, gets the ball rolling, shows that we're valuable, and then people will invite us in, right? Like they will make time, they will make it, they will give us budget, as long as what we ask for is kind of reasonable. So that's what I feel like the solution needs to look like. And this is kind of where I've got to so far. And it's kind of two things. There's a mindset shift that needs to happen, right, in how people perceive UXs and how we perceive ourselves. And then we also need to be kind of more specific about how we categorize or break down research, right? Like, so there's we know all the different kinds of activities that we can do, which we call research, which definitely go into all these different phases of the cycle, but we need to find ways to decide what we need to do when, and what we might need to find time for in the process. So the mindset shift kind of comes down to this, I think, which is, instead of being a scientist, we need to be a UX detective, right? We don't want to be a UX researcher, we want to be a UX detective, which kind of just sounds more fun, if anything else. I'd love to be a UX detective. She changed LinkedIn, and who knows. Anyway, so I think when I talk to a lot of people in business and I'm kind of pitching that we need to do research, they hear that and they kind of think lab coats and long-running studies that prove things without any kind of, I guess, no room for error, right? We want to be as 100% scientific about the whole process. When really what we're doing is not that. Like UX research on the ground isn't necessarily that scientific, right? And detectives need to be thorough, right? Like what they're doing is important and needs to be accurate, and they need to be able to back up their claims. But what they need to do is like get out into the field, like get out of the lab and into the field, and they're kind of talking to people and asking questions, and you want to kind of understand motivations and bring that stuff back. Right? Bring all of that colour back. Not a result, not a finding, not a thing that you proved, but all of those things that you've discovered that have kind of been part of your case. And cases really feel like they're shorter than research studies. Like they're not, but just when you think about it, I like to think they've gone out and like I'm solving this particular case. Like why aren't people clicking this button at checkout? And I can go and like do that and go away and come back and figure that out, and then I'll go and get sent out on another case, and we can kind of work together as a team on that. And it doesn't need to be purely scientific, especially if you get to do it more than once. Where this becomes a real hold-up is that if you only get one shot to do the UX research at the start of the project, you better be right. Like you don't have any room for error. And so being here on the left-hand side is much easier as long as you get to kind of be iterative about it. So that's the mind, I can't say this, mind shift challenge. But the other one is about being more specific about the research techniques. And the way I guess I try and break it up is there's this directional stuff and there's this foundational stuff. And what are the things that, like, if we sort of start with the assumption that all of the UX research needs to be within the team, like that's the team working on this stuff is kind of where it belongs. We want this information to kind of be in there and everyone to kind of be a part of it. What are the things that we can safely pull out, right? What are the things that don't need to be in flow? What are the things that take a little bit more time? What are the things that get better with more time, right? And so some of those things are like, if we think of like directional, right? These are the things that need to stay within the team. This is like usability experiments that answer specific questions and help the day-to-day direction of the team as opposed to sort of the bigger, larger scale stuff. And put more simply, it's like, if you're thinking about going on a holiday with like a group of 5 people, you get on a road trip, like how do you decide where you're going to go? You're going to ask them, right? Like, what do you like? Where do you want to go? Where have you been before? What should we do, right? And then you kind of agree on that destination. And directional research is when you go and find out like what's going to happen as you go. Like, are we going to stop at this lunch spot or that lunch spot? Are we going to do this day trip or that day trip? And it would be super frustrating if you tried to do all of that research up front and then like pile it all into the project or into the trip as you go. Like, I found out that you statistically like chicken parmas more than you like steaks, so we're going to do 3 parmas and then 2 steaks. And like, it's just easy to find out as people are using the product and they're kind of making their decision. So it's kind of, what is the directional stuff and what is the foundational stuff? So when we think of directional, we want to have the stuff takes a short time to conduct, right? This stuff needs to happen kind of within the 2-week cycle of development teams work. Yeah, so it wants to be kind of under a week, under 2 weeks, it needs to be short. This stuff, on the other side, foundational stuff, is stuff that takes over a week, right? You got to plan it, you got to get out into the field and talk to people, and that takes time. You got to like tickets or get in the car. So the stuff that takes more time than that. And then there's relevance, right? So it's like things that answer specific point in time questions as opposed to these insights that can remain not valuable forever, but like 3, 6, 12 months. And things you want to do every sprint, kind of like a hygiene, things you brush your teeth, you want to do this kind of stuff, as opposed to stuff that's like less frequent. So to really kind of dive into this directional research, it is pointed, it has a short lifespan, it answers a specific question. It gets communicated simply. So the thing that I guess this helps with is if you decide that you're doing directional research and you're not doing foundational stuff, you shouldn't be making PowerPoint slides and sticking that into a server somewhere for no one to find, right? You want to just like, what did I go and find? I found this, and then they go and make the change. Don't spend too much time communicating it, or just embrace how rough the whole thing is. And I guess the output is that it should just be like, yeah, specific yes, no, ready to implement recommendations. So if we think about this in terms of sprints, right, or we think about this in kinds of things that people do iteratively, you can kind of do one thing every 2 weeks, and there's not too much problem with that, right? Like we can kind of do a usability test and find out what are the sort of the common problems people are having, and then we can redesign those things and kind of get them out there. We might then like sort of validate some of our assumptions, A/B experiments, analytics reports, these things that we can do quickly, iteratively, and it's amazing if you just kind of separate it out. You're just like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do one every 2 weeks. You get through a lot more than if you spend a lot of time planning to kind of batch them all up. So some examples, I guess, to kind of make this more clear is that like, should the button label be submit or register and continue? We did an A/B test, 500 people, register and continue 1. Done, that's it, we reported it back. Are there any usability issues with the current screen designs? Some usability testing, and like the book Sprint by Google Ventures can show us that we can prepare those things indefinitely under a week. There's no reason why we need to do anything more than that. And then we kind of come up with very specific recommendations, right? Like here are the things that we should do. And it might surface other foundational things as well. We want to make sure that this stuff gets communicated before we wrap up that other stuff. We can communicate that out later. Again, we might have a hypothesis that we run a usability test to answer that. So then we move to like the other side of this equation, right? The foundational stuff, the fun stuff, the interesting stuff, where innovation comes from getting out into the field and learning this stuff. That's where this foundational stuff really sits. It's where we aim to truly understand what our users want. And we really need to focus on the output here. This is where the output really matters, right? Like if I want to create a persona that, I guess, engages people and gets people wanting to use it, it probably should look nice. And not look nice in like fancy colors, but like be easy to read and digest, and something that kind of attracts people to see it on the wall and to use it. It should be clear. It could be like, this is where we want to take some time maybe to edit some videos together, right? So people can see users actually talking in their own words. Small clips that people can reference all of the time. Here's where the output really, really matters. It's going to be around for a while and we want it to be very effective. And kind of on a side note here, when I talk about how important the output is, like, kind of run a bit of an experiment to find out like what output do the developers want to see? What are the project owners or the people who are paying for the whole thing? Like, what is it that they want to get out of this research? What's the thing they care about? And design the output for that, right? Instead of using like the super dodgy persona slide from earlier on, like figure out how they like to consume information and design for that. And so then this looks like this, right? So we've got waves of foundational research. I haven't just said here's like foundational research bucket at the start. It kind of comes in waves. And the other point I kind of want to make is that, coming back to that kind of freshness thing, like the value of it kind of diminishes over time. So you conduct the research, you get a whole bunch of stuff, And then as that kind of gets forgotten, it kind of dwindles down, and then you want to do some more. And it's very additive in how it works. It has these kind of waves. You can't sit on it. You can't, it doesn't sort of stay static. And it's kind of really important that we communicate to like our stakeholders that this is kind of the effect of research. So the kinds of things that fit here are like discovery, ethnographic research, user interviews, personas, journey maps, all of this stuff is what we might, so these artifacts we might want to create from spending a little bit more time. And so then they come together, right? We've got our experiments that we're doing, and we've got our foundational research that we're doing. We can see that one's not necessarily tied to the other, like the experiments are happening kind of on their sequence, and these other research reports kind of, this foundational stuff happens on their own schedule. They don't need to marry up. Generally speaking, you might kind of want to start this maybe a little bit earlier, you know, like, but not too much earlier. You don't want to find out anything too long before you start building it, because that stuff will get old before you start. And if we think about it kind of, if we think about it like this, we've got like kind of that foundational stuff is where we've got the insights that hold value over time, and that it actually, like, if we spend more time on it, we'll find more things, right? So if we go out and meet 10 people, right, that'll give us good stuff. But if we met 20 people, that'd be amazing, right? It really, that value adds up. Whereas if we do a usability test, we talk to 6 people and we find out what the problems are, you don't get any extra points for talking to 20 people or talking to 30 people. And so that kind of sits down here, right? Insights that are relevant for just a moment in time until the development team changes and the tool gets implemented. I don't know what to do with these other quadrants. Stuff kind of happens in there, but there's not that much stuff that kind of has diminishing returns, but you know, like you do a little bit of it and it holds over time. I'm sure there is stuff, but it's not super all the time. Like, this kind of feels hard to justify to me, right? Like you do lots of that and it only stays relevant for a specific point in time. I'm sure there are things where that's valuable, but not a lot. So I guess to make the diagram, or like how do we do this in practice, right? Like how would we do this thing? Kind of created this simple canvas for kind of me to use, but I think it details, I guess, at least one process for getting around this. And the way I would use it is you print it out kind of big on the wall, you get the team to all stand around with a bunch of sticky notes, right? It's like super agile, you're going to feel really productive at the end of this session. And we start by deciding what the theme and the outcome of the project is, right? So the theme is kind of like the project title. But we don't want that to be like a specific feature or anything that's going to, like, I guess, shape everything else that we do in a really restrictive way. So I guess if we think of an example, like you're working for like a hotels company, right? So you go in there and people search for hotels and it gives them recommendations on accommodation. They might want to improve their search, say, right? So they're going to improve their search. They might, you know, they've found that users are struggling with that, and so they might want to do something in that space. Go update search is the thing. And then the outcome. What do you want to get by improving search? Because improving search, like, it's really nice, it's probably good in the experience outcome, but like, what does that promote users to do, right? Is it lower bounce rates on the search side, right? Like they get to a page, or like, I guess not bounce rates, more like returns, right? So you kind of see that behavior in analytics. People get to the search page, they go to a result, then they come back, they go to another, and then they come back, and that might indicate that they're not finding the thing that they want straight away. Right, so one of the things we might do is we might say, okay, we're going to reverse that behavior, we want to reduce that behavior. Or we might just say we want more people to check out, like they found the thing they were looking for through a process, and then we had a higher conversion rate. So it's important to know what's the outcome we're trying to achieve, because there's lots of multiple ways that we can do that. So here's kind of the fun post-it note, super agile thing, and down the bottom we spend 5 minutes and we think about what are all the questions that we have, right? So developers, testers, everyone, what are the questions we have of users? If you had a user right here, what are the things that you would ask them, right? And so that's like, what do you search for? Like, what's important to you? Walk me through like how you go about booking this accommodation. Questions you might have, they might be yes or no, or they might be, I guess, more descriptive things. And then, what are your assumptions? What are the things you think you know? And look, these are kind of like two sides of the same coin here. Like, I could phrase an assumption as a question, or I could take a question and pose it as an assumption. It doesn't really matter. It's just trying to get all the stuff out of people's heads. An assumption might be that people find it really important to sort the list alphabetically, right? So we think that's important. for whatever reason. So we put it up there. So then what we do is we just categorize them into stuff. So what is the riskiest stuff? What is the riskiest assumptions? What are the most interesting questions? What's the stuff that we should do before the project starts? What's the stuff that if we got it wrong, things would collapse and we'd have to do lots of rework. Right? And that stuff goes to the left. Right? So we've kind of got like 3 rounds of foundational research we're going to do. We've got a bunch of experiments that we can do and just divvy these things out. So the experiment might be, our assumption was that people like to sort alphabetically. Right? The feature might already be there on the site. Let's delete it for 20% of the users and see if their conversion goes down. Right? We can A/B test it. Or we could like quickly kind of roll in some feature that's not super scalable and then see if people can click that button. Right? Like the project might not have kind of started in full, we might not be building anything really interesting, but we could be gathering information as an Agile team. And then we might want to go out, get some people in who have booked holidays and see like, so we're booking a holiday for your kids, what are you looking for? And they're like, oh, we're looking for a pool, or it's really important, like it would be great if I could just find hotels like the one I went to last time, but in different locations. Oh, great, and you kind of write that down. So once you've kind of finished the activity, you want to hang this up somewhere visible, and you want to kind of keep it as a live document. So we go through and we're going to conduct our first experiments, and we might do our first foundational research piece. And like that first thing might solve these 2 questions here. It might like just come up in conversation, so you can kind of move these things off. They're solved. You might read more questions, so you might add stuff here as you go. And you might not you might ask a bunch of questions in here and feel like it just didn't get to the point you were trying to make, and so you can kind of schedule a follow-up or make a different prototype to kind of test there in this sort of second round of foundational things. And then this is kind of ongoing, right? Like this could be 3 months worth of work, it could be 6 months worth of work, it could be 2 weeks worth of work. Like depending on the pace that you're working at, you can fit this much kind of stuff in on that pace, depending on how many UX researchers you have, or how many development teams, how many products. So it kind of just scales out to the right-hand side. You can kind of keep working in this iterative way. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of where I got to in like splitting out these different kinds of activities. And I guess it's really important that like with these top things here that the development team really feel involved in these things, right? Like they don't want to see it as a pain in the ass that they have to set up this A/B test experiment for you. And that all comes back to sort of showing code. So my last slide on this is, so what are some other recommendations of working in Agile teams? So if I've never worked in one before, or I've kind of come into sort of a team and I'm struggling to find my footing, what are some of the things that I would recommend people do? And the first one is kind of embrace the fact that the Agile team is like, they're the guiding force of what you do. They're the ones producing the software, they're the ones who are getting things done. And like, you want to kind of get into that and find out how you can help them. It's kind of this servant leadership thing where like, what is blocking them from using your research? And like, change that, get in there. Present things in the way that they want, and embrace that like they're going to work better if they can kind of build up a cadence of work that they're producing and shipping all the time. The next one is you can be clever about batch sizing and time boxing. So batch sizing is where we kind of choose how many things we want to ship at a particular time. So how many features, how much code, do we kind of wait until all of the features are finished before we kind of ship that out, and that would be a large batch size. Or do we try and find ways to make our features smaller, right? Like you roll them out in smaller chunks, and it's kind of proven, or it's very clear that like development teams work better when there isn't this large batch thing happening. And as I kind of talked about before, like as designers, I found myself wanting to do the whole thing, and I kind of put it out as a challenge, right? Like if you're designing something, find the ways to break it down, find the interesting things that you can do to have smaller batches. And it'll help the experience as well. Like there's plenty of examples where some company goes ahead and does this massive redesign. So on one day it looks one way, and even if it's bad, users like are used to that's the way that it works, and then it completely changes the next day and they lose like track of what they're doing. It's like, oh, I was just trying to do that thing, and they're out, right? Like users don't behave well to massive changes, and so finding ways to shrink what you're delivering is going to help a lot. And time boxing is just, what can we do in 2 weeks? So just changing the mindset of like, this is all the stuff we need to get out, to like, how can we improve the experience in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks? Use the power of the team to experiment. If you're a UXer and you've never really worked with a development team before, like it is really powerful to have people who like can write code for you and make prototypes for you and run experiments for you and get direct access to people. Like it's this thing that once you get access to that data and that power, it's really hard to go away from. It's hard to come back from. It's hard to get back into the kind of the design silo that you were in. Now this is the one which kind of supports everything else, and kind of without time to refactor the experience, none of this works. So if we're kind of implementing features and we're learning as we go, but we don't have any time to go back and clean up, it kind of all starts to fall apart, right? So there's this concept with developers that we have technical debt. And so if they don't take time to kind of clean up what they're doing, it gets more complicated and it slows the team down. They can't sort of ship as many features as we go. The same thing happens with user experience, right? The experience debt grows over time and it needs to be paid down. And so we need to sort of learn ways to do that. And that really, if you're finding the first three really hard or you're not feeling you get a lot of buy-in, make sure that there's time for this and everything else will kind of run a little bit smoother. Really embrace the UX as a cross-functional skill. Like the more people that you kind of bring into the process here by letting them do things and letting them experiment and let them be the voice of the user, just makes everyone else's life really easy. And I guess in the other way too, like learn a little bit about development. The more you can kind of empathize with what the developers are doing and the struggles that they face, kind of make you more empathetic, and it will help kind of inform the things that you're doing. Like you don't need to become a developer or a tester in the same way that they don't need to become a researcher or a UXer, but having that kind of shared empathy amongst the team makes things do well. And then very lastly, when in doubt, embrace these UX principles, which I'm not going to go through one by one. They're the kind of thing you can Google, but I find myself going back to them all the time when I'm kind of faced with the decision, like what should I do? Should I do this process or that process? And I guess in this talk maybe I've made it sound a little bit easier than it is, but like when you're stuck in the moment and you want to learn a thing, it can be hard to know what to do. But these kind of all line up with what the developers are trying to achieve as well. Communication, continuous delivery, small batch sizes, being small and dedicated code-loaded environments, and this anti-pattern of rock stars, gurus, and insights, right? Like we don't want to be the genius who rocks the design. We want everyone to kind of come up. Great, so that's everything I had about research, and I definitely wanted to have time for some questions at the end. But before I did that, I kind of wanted to pitch two projects that I'm working on at the moment, and I guess I want to do that one because hopefully you're like really interested in them. Like it's a room of kind of UX and product people, and I feel like there's a cool, interesting UX producty things. So this is Beaker and Flint. This is what the website looked like since the weekend. It's very new for us, but it is something that we've been thinking about for a long time, and we've been working and crafting and trying to design what this thing is. And what it is access to experienced UXers, product managers, and Agile experts in one-on-one direct coaching, online or in person, along with a whole bunch of kind of curated resources. So not like thousands of videos about everything that you need to look at, but just advice of like, look at this thing and apply this. It's kind of like, I guess, a gym membership or a personal training membership for UX and product management, if that came with like the gym and the weights and all those other things you kind of needed to be successful. And I guess the reason I'm showing this now is it's not something that is open for purchase yet. It's not something that we're finished doing, but if you go onto the site and you can scroll all the way down to the bottom, we've got a place where you can kind of click on a button and register to kind of be part of our research group, be part of the first people that we want to, use this with, see if it works. So yeah, sign up for that, and we're going to share more information as we kind of go along, invite people into kind of free testing. So this is kind of me trying to, do the things or practice what I preach. And also like follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm going to be sharing the slides and the canvas, and you can contact us on there. So that's a good way to kind of keep up with all that. Number one. Number two is the flight plan. And this is like a rapid prototyping tool built on the blockchain for the blockchain. So I also like to think about it as like a rapid prototyping platform community. So I guess I've only very much been introduced to the blockchain like somewhat recently, so I don't know, for the last 4 or 5 months I've been trying to learn about this super complicated thing. Is it good? Is it bad? How do I use it? And it's been around for a long time, but it's really only been like locked off to like the very technical or the very, I guess, dedicated to understanding this thing. And people talk about that this could be as big as the internet, and like, who knows? Maybe it's not, maybe it is, say it's half, say it's a quarter. That's way too important to be something that's locked away to just a few people to kind of muck around with. And it's kind of where we get in trouble with cryptocurrencies, right? Like there's a bunch of people, they have no idea what they're doing, they try and get involved, and it kind of costs all this money to get involved. And like one day I'm a millionaire and the next day I kind of have nothing. And that's not a very safe space to play around with tech. So when you think about like the flight plans, this prototyping platform, it's for UXs, it's for product people, it's to make it easy to get in there and experiment at kind of low cost, like low risk, to I guess try and get some diversity into that thinking, right? Like get the product people, get the UXs so we can have a really good experience. So again, we don't have working software that you can access on the site, but you can log in, put your email, we're opening up our Slack channels, and we really are interested in getting UX's product people in there, so we can kind of learn and shape it as we go. So that's everything that I had to talk about. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening. Sorry if you spoke.
Thank you, Ben. Just any questions?
Sure. At the front, I guess.
I'll be first. Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could expand. Oh, by the way, great preso.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could expand a little bit about the experience steps. Like, what do you mean? Yeah. In terms of cleaning up.
Yeah, of course. So I guess the way I kind of imagine it, and when I kind of work on Agile teams, there's times where you need to kind of make a judgment call, right? So we want to implement a feature, and we might be doing it kind of this way because we want to do it quickly, right? Like, we're kind of rushing, but like we want to get the feature out. Or we might come up to a feature and we're like, oh, we really need to kind of test which way that could kind of go, but like, let's not hold up the project for that. And so some of these things, they go out into production and we kind of learn from them. And what we want to do, I guess, when we talk about getting rid of that experience debt, is that if we do research and find out that that stuff's not working, or we released a feature that we weren't super happy with for speed, just take time to go back and tidy up the little things. It's not necessarily like the big things will take time to get fixed, but it's sort of the little things. It's like the consistency or the colors or the interaction or these little things that kind of play on the user's mind that they almost don't notice. That also don't take that much time for developers to fix if you can just kind of batch a few of them together, So if you're thinking about like a 2-week sprint, this sprint we're going to spend 10% of our time fixing some of these experience bugs. That kind of helps polish and clean up things, and it means that we're less precious about kind of letting things that we're not super happy with kind of go out, because we know we'll be able to go back and fix them. Is there something like that?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if you experimented with your canvas, but if you experimented with integrating into Teams Kanban more rather than, I feel like the functional stuff feels like an epic level and the directional stuff more like a story level. Did you try and integrate it more into the Kanban so you've got like more part of the team? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was showing, I think I saw him just rocked up, but Mac, who, he's okay waving in the back, but I showed him this today, and he had the exact same question about how does this integrate in with Kanban, and I think that there's value in kind of pulling some of that stuff out so we can kind of see all the research together. But what I imagine goes into the Kanban boards is this top stuff. Like what I would do is definitely be representing that stuff on the wall in the Kanban so that stuff is pulling through and it is something developers are working on. This stuff, I wouldn't kind of want to muddy up the boards with it too much because it will kind of wreck the people's pace if it goes through too slowly. But this stuff definitely, you want to track and have everyone work on it.
I have a second follow-up question around, I guess, the foundational and getting the team to come out with you and how, I guess, the balance between documentation versus actually just taking people out and building that foundational knowledge?
Yeah.
And what is the benefit of documenting? Is it just team stability, or are there other factors that you've had in your experience where you want to document stuff rather than just get people to experience it firsthand, like on sometimes?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess to state that I think anytime you can get a developer to come out with you is like way better, right? If I had to choose between the two, getting people out there, way better, 100%. That being said, two things about documenting. One is that you need to be able to kind of share things within kind of a wider group. And I really think that video is almost better sometimes than like doing a report, because you can kind of just see people talking. It's not that difficult if it's on your iPhone. So you do want to be able to share the work that you do, and you want to be able to go back and reference it later. But really all you're doing is capturing that moment in time for people to remember back. And the other thing I'd say about documenting things into an artifact is sometimes I find it kind of helps my creative flow to try and absorb the information and figure out how I'm going to lay it out visually. Like there's something about thinking like, what is this? How would I sum this person up in like a bit of stock photography, or how would I phrase this quote in something that kind of fits in there, or how would I summarize this journey into something that's simple? There's something about that kind of helps my process. I'm not sure if it helps yours as well, then that's a benefit. If it doesn't, then I wouldn't do it.
Do you have any model or framework to kind of figure out the relationship between questions and assumptions and evidence and intuition?
Doesn't matter. I guess there's like some people think in questions and some people think in assumptions. So like you can almost just get rid of the two titles and just like tell people to write down the things they think. Because there's no relation between say things you put here and whether you put them there or there. It's just I guess if you're thinking about different personality types.
No. I'm more thinking like, because sometimes your assumptions, I claim that this is proven already, right?
Yeah.
So you put links to all these assumptions, but then do you start calling them evidence, or how do you change this?
I really love that you brought that up. Yeah, that's a really good point. And that here's what you want to kind of list, I guess, as assumptions or questions. But where evidence is really, I guess, interesting is that someone might put up an assumption or a question, and like you've actually got research that like backs that up, but it wasn't accessible to the team because no one's going to go and read every different PowerPoint that was created in a document every time you start a new process. So having that kind of question or the assumption up in one of these things, having a UXer who go, oh, actually, those four we have facts about, like they don't need to go up here, or you don't need to worry about doing those, like they're solved. It kind of gives you access to some of that old, as you say, like evidence or insight to kind of reuse it. Kind of just calls out like, oh, I don't know this, and you're like, great, we do.
So do you rename them then, or you put them on a different list, or how do you keep track of this all the time?
So I mean, how you kind of store UX research stuff so it's easy to access, it's hard. I mean, I have thoughts, but it's definitely hard to like store that stuff so people keep testing it. And I wouldn't necessarily put evidence up here, like here are things that we know and are proven. Like this is just trying to figure out what does the team kind of want to learn. But if you have evidence that backs up this stuff, you don't need to recreate the work every time. Show us to that.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool. So I see this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this where you're more of an embedded UXer and you're actually facilitating and moderating the research which does actually work, is actually speaking with users? Or is this where you're actually delegating out some of those roles and responsibilities of facilitation and also management of the research?
Sure. I kind of see this working in both models. So if I'm an embedded UXer, I'm going to have to spend my time concentrating on what the team's doing. Like there are sometimes I want to concentrate on what they're doing, and there's sometimes I'm going to want to step out of that, right? I'm going to have to pull myself out and get out into the field, and I want to be able to do both those things. As the same as like if you're working external to the teams, you want to be able to sometimes get into the teams, get into the detail, and then pull yourself out. So I guess I'd say instead of thinking about whether UXs are in the team or out of the team, either one I would try and make sure here's the stuff that we're doing together, and here's some of the stuff that is going to be more longer term. Does that answer your question? I would kind of do it if you were both people.
Yeah.
And if I guess to finish that a little bit, if I was in a role where there wasn't a UXer in the team and I couldn't dedicate myself to being in the team, I would try and empower the development team to run as much of this stuff as they can, right?
So there would be a lot of dependency on how mature their UX skills were
Yeah.
as to whether or not they were capable of the cadence that you'd set in this document.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can, what I would do is like, you can spread this out if they're not very mature, like, you know, like let's do one every 2 months and see how we go.
Yeah.
Or you could do it once every 2 weeks. And it kind of starts small, like most developers, they, you know, they'll easily able to do like A/B tests and you can help them with that. And then kind of like usability tests probably a little bit far away. So like, yeah, scale up. You don't have someone on the team.
How often have you found it necessary to run this planning exercise? My assumption is you probably wouldn't wait until you get through the majority of it. You can just revisit it.
Yeah, I would try and like revisit this all the time. I would try and think about, okay, like if you get to the end of this here, I would just kind of redo that experiment, but there's probably going to be less questions and less assumptions. You probably want to do it at project kickoff, you know, so when you've got a team and they're starting to build, you want to do something like this. And then if you can kind of do it a bit earlier, you know, like if there's kind of a discovery phase or there's something, it's pretty easy to do. And if you do it, you get some questions, you kind of dig it out. There's no cost to it. Is that answer your question? Sure, Mike, there's one at the back and then
So one of the challenges that we have as researchers or UXers is translate the research insights into business value. How does this fit that question? How can I, as a researcher, translate that pathway, that roadmap, that model into the actual business value that each of those different segments bring to the actual business?
Sure, absolutely. So, showing business value of UX research can definitely be tricky.
Or UX, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, sorry, UX research or all these kind of things. I guess the way I would imagine this helping that is by trying to bring that value really early on. Like, if you do a small kind of experiment or something like right at the start, that like clean, you know, like sort of, you know, find something small that then you can like get into a development team and fixed. Showing that value kind of gives you a little bit more room to move next time. And I guess when you're working in these kind of teams, the whole thing is that like it's hard at the start, but then you all build up a cadence together over time. And so if you do little things first, that value then equates back. There's one, the project that kind of springs to mind where there's some people here. So it's like we did some UX research. We went out there and we were kind of looking for something else. But as we were kind of going through the scenarios and we were watching someone click through the website, we found that like there was this really weird, I guess, limiting thing when they tried to add something to the cart. You know, like they sort of clicked a button and then a weird thing would pop down, and like it was like 4 out of the 6 people were really struggling with this thing, and it was just something small, something we weren't looking for. Being able to exit the research and instead of doing the first thing you do is like document everything, is just focus on that like small little thing, get that into a team and fixed. It was like way easier after that to like spruik the benefits of doing the next research, right? Because it's not paid for itself, but yeah, it's shown value. I'm not sure if I answered that exactly the way that you wanted to. Like, how does UX research really show value? I mean,
it's not really value, sorry to interrupt you, it's more about business value, right? Because at the end of the day, we are helping designers, we're helping product people, you know, product managers, whatever you want to call them, to make a change in the overall design that will bring the actual business value.
Yeah. I mean, business value and user value should be pretty tightly linked, right? Like, if you make things easy to use, people should use them more.
Precisely.
Like, it's kind of hard to argue. Like if you can make the overall experience, but you don't see movement in any other kind of user number, like that's really hard to justify. But it's usually not the case, right? It usually just means that you don't have a way of measuring the success of the improvement that you found. And developers are the best people to help you write tests to find that user behavior, especially if they're invested. Like if it's their idea, like they'll write every test they can find to like figure out how to prove that.
Thank you.
Time we'll do one more.
So if you have a product, you run for a while, in terms of like old product, it's iterating all the time, and you have the foundation research probably been done a few years ago, and actually spend a lot of money and resources on it.
Yeah.
how do you make sure that's going to refresh? Because that's so much time and resource time. And I know experimental research people can do that all the time, which is basically being tested. It's every sprint. This is the foundation stuff. How can you validate it's still relevant? How can you also balance the cost?
Yeah. I mean, I guess my first argument was like, don't spend lots of money on UX research up front. Like, that definitely makes it harder to sell in more research after that.
Yeah.
I guess if the question is like, how do you improve the value to business to like why this research is old and not validated anymore? Like, I guess the situation is you're saying we need to make personas, and they're like, well, we already have these personas from 4 years ago. That can be a hard case. I think, I mean, there's no super magic bullet, but like running these like iterative tests, right? Like doing that stuff will kind of help show like this doesn't match up with what we've done, right? Like we're starting to see different users behave in different ways.
I cannot prove till I do the research.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I think the smaller you can make it, if you can do little things, and there's a lot you can do in small ways, you can show that value to ramp up. And it also, I guess the other thing I just like lastly say on that, and it's not really answers your question, but like pitching smaller UX research to people in the business is sometimes quite refreshing. You know, like being able to go in and say, look, I don't need $10,000 to do this, I need $2,000 to do this. That can be easier to sign up for. Sometimes because we're like, we're never going to get to do UX research again, we kind of gold plate the whole thing and make it so expensive that we can never get it over the line. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's answering your question specifically, but I think that's how I approach it.
Cool. All right, thanks everyone for the questions.